Good evening, everyone. I hope you are enjoying your Sunday evening. I am Lynx, and I am one of the hostesses on Hearth of Europa, and I hope that you are having a good Sunday.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name's Katrina, other half of the show. Uh, yeah, hope you all had a good Sunday dinner. Hope you're all ready to relax and listen to some stories about trolls.
Yeah.
That's what we have today. Just to make it clear, not the internet kind. This is not the Chronicles of Ken M, the original Yahoo troll. Not the right show. If you came here for that, not those sort of trolls. Not the cute ones from the movie either. Just to make absolutely clear.
Yeah, this is
Anyone
a
was here for any of those, not them.
no. As a Norwegian, I have to say that I can be a bit irritated with the use of the term trolls because I grew up with trolls, and this show is about the real trolls from the Scandinavian lore. Uh, and
They've never encountered a real troll in their life.
no, and it's definitely not the so-called internet trolls, the keyboard warriors that just out to make trouble. Trolls are out to make trouble. I'm not claiming they aren't, but they don't frequent the internet. And welcome, Buckshot, for 33. Good of you to join us. Okay, so to start off a bit about trolls in Norwegian lore. In many ways, it's a collective term for several creatures. All of them are from the netherworld, of course, but there are many kinds, and it's also used more as a curse word. Um, for example, if your wife is a bit of a bitch, then you can call her a troll. But we have mountain trolls, sea trolls, and forest trolls. And in some stories, they turn up as more of a helper. Um, it's usually a hero who comes across a troll, usually a woman in those cases, who are in some sort of trouble. For example, in one story, there's a troll woman who has caught her big nose in a tree stump, and nobody is willing to help her get loose. And of course, the hero of the story is willing to help, and in return, he usually gets some gifts. For in one story, we have him being gifted a ball of yarn, and when he places it on the ground, it starts rolling off by itself and shows him the way that he should go to his fortune. So they're not all bad, but in for the most part, they are wild creatures who are after humans, in particular Christians, and the main phrase goes, "Oh, I can smell Christian man's blood," and they want to kill the human. So that might not be one you want to meet in the forest.
Which is indeed something that's cropped up in English fairy tales just off the top of my head with giants actually. There seems to be a little parallel there because of course everybody knows the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. He in older versions he does actually often say the giant, I can smell the blood of a Christian man,
Yeah,
not an Englishman.
yeah. It seems to be something that came with Christianity, perhaps, and
Yes.
because that was a sign that you were a good person, was that you were a Christian. So it differentiated you from the more bad characters and of the bad forces. So in that sense, it makes sense that they were after Christians. as they were not necessarily a good character, but as we will see, you can also live peacefully side by side with them. And if you treat them with respect, then they will be nice to you. Good evening, Burika. Thank you for
Yes,
joining us. And thank you
lovely
for the
to have
host.
you. Yes, always grateful for hosting.
Yeah, we always love to see Burika in our streams. She is a wonderful woman. Okay, so I think I will just go for the story. It is a pre-recorded story, my first one. It is called "The Two Young Boys Who Met the Trolls in of Hedal Forest," and here it is. Two of their sons were as good as half grown, and they were always wandering around the village, begging. In that way they had learned all the roads and paths in the area, and they knew the way to Hedalen by foot. One day they heard that some falconers had built themselves a cabin by Mäla, so they wanted to go there. Perhaps they could see the birds and how they were captured. So they took the path over the long marshes. However, it was so late in the autumn that the milkmaids had gone home from the pastures, and they found no place to stay and no food. So they had to keep to the road to Hedalen. It was but a shallow track, so when darkness fell, they lost the track and missed the falconer's cabin as well. And before they knew what to do, they found themselves deep in the densest forest of Bjölsta. When they realized they could not get through, they decided to build a fire and a lean-to with their small axe. Then they made a mattress out of heather and moss. They retired, and after a while they heard someone sniffing loudly. The boys listened very carefully to see if it was an animal or a forest troll outside. It sniffed even more loudly, then said, "I can smell Christian blood here." The steps were now so heavy that the ground shook beneath them, for they knew the trolls were out this evening. "God help us, what shall we do?" said the youngest boy. "Oh, you will remain standing here under the pine tree, and be ready to gather a axe and run when you see them coming. I will take the small axe," said the oldest brother. Just then they saw the trolls charging. They were so big and huge that their heads were level with the pine tops, but they had but one eye between the three of them. Had to take turn to use it. They had holes in their foreheads where they put it, and used their hands to turn it. The one in front had the eye, while the others went behind, holding on to the one in front. "Run," said the oldest boy, "but don't run so far before you see how it goes. They have their eyes so high it will be difficult for them to see me when I get behind them." Well, the youngest brother ran away, and the trolls ran after him. Meanwhile, the eldest brother got behind them and chopped the last troll on his ankle so it gave a terrible scream. This alarmed the first troll so badly it jumped, and the eye fell from its hands. The boy snatched it up. It was bigger than if you put two clay balls together, and when you looked through it, the dark night became as clear as day. When the trolls realized the boy had taken their eye, and that he had injured one of them, they began to threaten everything evil if he did not return the eye to them. "I am not afraid of neither trolls nor threats," said the eldest boy. "Now I have three eyes alone, while the three of you have none, and two of you have to carry the third. If you don't give back the eye this very moment, we will turn you to log and stone," shouted the trolls. The boy thought that was a bit rash. He was not scared of neither boasting nor enchantment.
If they did not leave him alone, he would use his axe on all three of them, so they would be forced to crawl on the ground like maggots to get home. This scared the trolls, and they began to entreat him instead. If he would only give them back their eye, he would have gold and silver and everything he asked for. Well, the boy liked the sound of that, but he would have the gold and silver first. So he said that one of the trolls had to go and fetch as much gold and silver as he and his brother could carry in their sacks, and they should have 2 good steel bows. Then they would have their eye back, but until then he would keep it. The trolls complained about this. They could not go as they had no eye to see with. But one of them screamed for their wife, for they had but one wife between the three of them. After a while there came an answer from a hill far to the north. One of the trolls told her to bring buckets full of gold and silver and 2 steel bows. I would think it did not take long until she came. When she heard what had happened, she too began to threaten with enchantments. But the trolls were scared, and told her to be wary of the little wasp. She could not be certain he would not take her eye as well. So she threw the buckets filled with gold and silver and the 2 bows to the ground, then went back to the hills with her husbands. And since that time no one has heard of the trolls walking in Hedal forest, sniffing for Christian blood.
Okay, so that was the first story. That is quite a classical troll story with them being out in the wilderness and a human coming across them for some reason. And they're usually not the smartest creatures around. They're actually quite known for being quite stupid. So the way to defeat them is to outwit them, because humans are way smarter than them, while the trolls will have no trouble taking your life by strength. Buckshot, yes, I would think they got their eye back. The story doesn't really tell, but Norwegian stories usually go in the line of you have to keep your promise and be true to your word. And he did promise to give the eye back if he got gold, silver, and 2 bows, and he did. So they were probably giving back the eye. What do you think of the story, Katrina?
I think it's interesting that they've got this possession and only one of them has an eye. So followed by
Yeah,
I think I've not really seen that sort of symbolism of like only one who can see and not that well leading others who are just totally blind or in a story.
yeah. Well, it is sort of the one-eyed man who are leading the blind or something.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
it?
I like that.
Yeah,
World of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
yeah,
Say.
yeah. They were lucky that their wife had an eye as well. Um, it does remind of the Cyclops with the one eye and not 2.
Yes, that is
But
sort of reminiscent of Cyclops, definitely.
yeah, I would say so. But what I find more interesting is that it reminds me of the eye that Odin sacrificed to the well of Mimir in the Old Norse sagas. And I do wonder if that's the origin of it, because as far as I remember, Mimir was uh, he was a Norn, a Jutna, and they are sort of the precursors for the trolls. I would think there are quite a lot of similarities in particular those who are associated with mountains. And we have a mountain range in Norway called Jotunheimen, and that name is obviously derived from Jotun, Jutner.
Yes.
So the link is pretty clear. And by having his eye down Mimir's well, Odin was able to see everything, basically. So he wasn't totally disconnected to his eye that he had sacrificed. And it gave him a clearer vision, so that this is an eye that basically makes everything as clear as day. I found was very interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. A clear as day eye, especially with that context with Odin, as you are saying there. No, I hadn't actually thought about trolls as connected in any way to Odin, actually. But I suppose he does have relations with creatures that are not gods, not humans. He does have relations with giants and many sort of creatures.
Yeah, I don't know of any other ties to Odin that the trolls have. So it's specifically the eye and Mimir's Brynner. So it is very specific, and it's one of those tales that you read again as an adult when you know more, and you're basically just gobsmacked about the connection you have never thought of before. So that is actually quite funny. So I definitely found that one interesting. And another aspect I found that was quite interesting was how the boy pointed out that as they held the eye so high, they weren't able to see the eldest boy as he snuck around them. So a high vantage point might not be the best, and it sort of reminded me of Lord of the Rings. I know Tolkien had a lot of inspiration from the Old Norse tales, and including some of the Norwegian folk tales. For example, the name of Moria, that is from the Norwegian tale Soria Moria, which is a magic castle. And in this tale, it is that in several occasions, the closer you are to the danger, the further away you are from harm, as what Pippin said. So when the vantage point is very high, it's a tendency to look further away and not closer to you. So there is some truth to that.
Yeah, it does seem to be indeed. Now, I think also what strikes me about the story is the boys are indeed, very, very brave around these trolls, and they're quite easy to defeat by, the eldest boy just getting behind it and chopping at its ankle, and like, they're very, very easy to overcome with bravery, which I think is sort of typical of representations of forces of evil. Like, they look big and scary, but they're very easily overcome.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe what they're supposed to represent in this tale.
Yeah, the concept of not being too daunted, even if something looks very scary. If you have your wits around you, then you can overcome it. But we don't hear the stories of all those who failed to use their wits. but it's a common trope in Norwegian tales that when you come across trolls, in particular the forest trolls, they are fairly easy to overcome by using your brains, because you can't defeat them by strength unless you have some magic potion, which we see in other tales. Um, so I think that might have been sort of a common knowledge, so to speak, by my ancestors, that if you came
Yes.
across something, then you have to be smart about it. So there are several stories where the troll is defeated by simply being outsmarted. And as I said, their reputation isn't to be the sharpest knife in the books. So
Yeah, no, they don't seem to be. They
no.
definitely don't seem to be. I think that's quite similar for how England is with giants as well, which I think have sort of combined sort of some aspects of trolls and some aspects of Norwegian giants. They're not generally thought of as being very bright
Yeah.
at all. No,
Yeah.
it's like it's weird that they're not very bright, but they do seem to have like a lot of wealth.
Yeah.
They do seem to possess a lot of wealth, gold and silver.
Yeah. That is the typical of the trolls in Norwegian stories. They usually have vast treasures, um, and in some cases they also go after young maidens or princesses.
Yes, I've
So
seen them
yeah,
definitely go after young maidens and princesses before in these tales.
yeah,
No, I suppose you can just have as much gold and silver as you like when you could just pulverize someone for not giving it to you.
yeah, that is an aspect of it.
Yeah.
Welcome, Tim. White Rabbit Radio is hosting us, so that
Oh
is very
wow.
generous of you. Thank you.
Thank you indeed.
Yeah.
What
Oh,
is
yes.
what is the name of your next story,
That is
please?
that is Charcoal Mills. That is a Swedish story, and I've done my best to combine my English with Swedish place names, which was a bit of a tongue tire, I have to say. But I think it went well in the end. And this is another trope in Scandinavian stories. It's not necessarily just about trolls, it can also be other creatures, but it is how they live side by side and aren't always that easy to be recognized, because they're not always big ass trees or houses or something like that. They can be very much like humans. So here is the next story.
Charcoal Nils and the Troll Woman. In the old days, they lived on a headland that juts out into the northwestern corner of Lake Rasval, in the neighborhood of the Linde mining district. A charcoal burner named Nils, generally known as Charcoal Nils. He let a farmhand attend to his little plot of land, and he himself made his home in the forest, where he chopped wood in the summer and burned it to charcoal in the winter. Yet no matter how hard he struggled, his work was unblessed with reward, and no one ever spoke of him save as poor Charcoal Nils. One day, when he was on the opposite shore of the lake, near the gloomy Harsberg, a strange woman came up to him and asked whether he needed someone to help him with his charcoal burning. Yes, indeed, said he, help would be welcome. So she began to gather blocks of wood and tree trunks, more than Charcoal Nils could have dragged together with his horse, and by noon there was enough wood for a new kiln. When evening came, she asked the charcoal burner whether he was satisfied with the day's work she had done, and if she were to come back the next day. That suited the charcoal burner perfectly, and she came back the next day and all the following ones. And when the kiln had been burned out, she helped Nils clear it, and never before had he had such a quantity of charcoal, nor charcoal of so fine a quality. So she became his wife and lived with him in the woods for 3 years. They had 3 children, yet it worried Nils but a little, seeing as she looked after them, and they gave him no trouble. But when the 4th year came, she grew more exacting, and insisting on going back to his home with him, living with him there. Niels wished to hear nothing about this, yet since she was so useful to him in his charcoal burning, he did not betray his feelings, and said he would think it over. It happened one Sunday that he went to church, where he had not been for many years, and what he heard there brought up thoughts he had not known since the innocent days of his childhood. He began to wonder whether there was not some hocus pocus about the charcoal burning, and whether it were not due to the forest woman who aided him so willingly. Preoccupied with this and other thoughts, he forgot while returning to his kiln that he had promised the strange woman at the very beginning, when he had first helped him, that whenever he had been home and was returning to the kiln, he would rap 3 times with his axe against an old pine tree not far from it. On this occasion, as we have said, he forgot the sign, and as a result he saw something that nearly robbed him of his wits. As he drew near the kiln, he saw it all aflame, and around it stood the three children and their mother, and they were clearing out the kiln. They were pulling down and putting out so that flame, smoke, and ashes whirled in sky high. But instead of the spruce branches that was generally used to put out the fire, they had bushy tails which they dipped in the snow. When Charcoal Nils had looked on for a while, he slunk back to the old pine tree and made its trunk echo to the sound of 3 axe strokes, till one could hear them on the Haschberg. Then he went to the kiln, as though he had seen nothing, and all went on as before. The kiln was glowing with a handsome, even glow, and the tall woman was about and working as usual. As soon as she saw Charcoal Nils, she came back with a pressing demand to take her home to his little house, and that they lived there. Yes, that shall come about, said Nils to console her, and turned back home to fetch a horse. But instead he went out on the headland of Kallenäs, on the eastern shore of Lake Rasswell, where a wise man lived, and asked the latter what he should do. The old man advised him to go home and hitch his horse to his charcoal wagon, but to hitch the horse in such wise that there would be not a single loop either on the harness or the traces. Then he was to mount the horse and ride back to the kiln without stopping, have the troll woman and the children get into the wagon, and at once drive on the ice with them. The charcoal burner did as the old man told him, saddled his horse, paying strict attention that there were no loops in saddle or bridle, rode across the ice through the wood to his kiln, and told the troll woman and the children to get in. Then he quickly turned back through the woods out on the ice, and there let his horse run as fast as he could. When he reached the middle of the lake, he saw a pack of wolves running along in the direction of the Abodaland, at the northern end of the lake, and heading for the ice. Then he tore the saddle harness from the traces, so that the wagon with the troll folk was left standing on bare ice, and rode as fast as his horse could carry him for the opposite shore. When the trolls saw the wolves, they began to scream. Turn back, cried the mother, and if you will not for my sake, then at least do it for the sake of Vipa, your youngest daughter. But Charcoal Nils rode for the shore without looking back, and then he heard a troll woman calling on others for aid. Brother in the Haschberg, sister in Stripa, cousin in Ringfels, take the loop and pull. There is no loop to pull, came the answer from deep within the Haschberg. Then catch him at Harkallern. He's not riding in that direction, the reply came from Ringfels. And indeed, Charcoal Nils did not ride in that direction, but over stick and stone straight to his own home. Yet when he reached its own courtyard, the horse fell, and a shot from the trolls tore away a corner of the stable. Nils shortly after fell sick and had to lie abed for a number of weeks. When he was well again, he sold his forest land and worked the little farm by the cottage until his death. And so that was one occasion where the troll folk came off the second best.
Okay, so that was the second story. As you heard, it was a bit different from the first one. The troll woman was basically indistinguishable from a human one, and that was, of course, due to magic. In real life, she had a tail, a bushy tail, so by hiding that with magic, she could pose as a human. But it wasn't a permanent magic, so she had to basically put it on every time he came back. So, and we also have the concept of half-human children, which is something that occurs with quite a few creatures of the stories. It's not just the trolls, it's the Hulder and various other creatures that seduces either a man or a woman and have half-human children with them. So I would say that in this case, the troll woman might be some sort of a hybrid between a troll and a Hulder, I would think. I said they can be quite similar in many ways.
Yeah, the troll woman to me in this story, because she was, human and able to look like a human and reproduce with a human, she struck me as a witch, possibly. Whether she might be, because I know troll was also used sometimes in the sense of a magic user, or was it not?
Yeah, trolls are some types of trolls are definitely capable of magic. And you could also question if magic is the source of their richness, of all their gold and silver. Because it's not quite clear how they get it. Um,
Yeah, it isn't quite clear indeed how they do end up with it.
no.
I'm interested that this troll has, come and helped a human to make charcoal and, you know, wanted of it and wanted to be in a relationship with him. And
Yeah.
they've had 3 children, which, 3 is always a symbolically significant number.
Hmm.
Trinities and magic and what have you. And I just wonder what the troll woman's end game was really in having children with the charcoal burner.
Yeah, well, it's something you do see in quite a bit of stories, in particular with Hulder stories. Hulder is another creature of the underworld. It's usually a very, very beautiful woman with a tail. What kind of tail varies from region to region, but they are usually women, and they usually want to seduce a man. And in the case of a male Hulder, it's usually a very ugly man. Well,
Okay.
yeah, but the females do want to wrestle in with a human. They want to live with them and being able to pass as a human. So you could say that it is a likeness of how to put it, development. If you look at it in a bit more of an abstract way, that
Yes. Yeah, no, the sort of like demonic beings seeking to be with humans
Mm-hmm.
just sort of speaks to me of sort of darkness attracted to the light. You know, what with humans having the immortal soul, or being indeed the immortal soul,
Yeah.
and then you have these demonic beings that are attracted towards that sort of energy
Mm-hmm.
of humans, because you know, no matter how low they are sunk, they do have, or they are the beings of the immortal soul,
Yeah.
and they're sort of on a higher level than these sort of demonic beings. So maybe it's that they need to draw energy from, or sort of exist alongside of higher beings to
Yeah.
sort of continue having their magic and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. That's a theory. I may
mm-hmm.
be off base there.
Well, you do see so-called evil beings wanting to weasel their way into human life. So that is a general theme. Um, and in many cases, they want to corrupt the humans. But I'm not sure that's the case in all of these stories, because it seems more like they want to join them and spend their life with them.
Yeah, which would beg the question, if she wasn't malevolent, why you know, he was then concerned and to wanted to get rid of her and his children.
Well, they're not considered.
Because that's odd about this story, that we never find out what sort of intention the troll woman had with him, but he does just go straight to the old man.
Yeah, well, it's generally seen not as a good thing to harbor a troll under your house,
No,
under your
generally
roof.
not. It's like,
uh,
she's a troll.
yeah,
Yeah, probably better dump her.
and she does have powers, so she can be dangerous. And it's also a case of being troll bound, is the direct translation. It's basically being enchanted by the troll and being under their spell.
I guess casting off as well his half troll children could be symbolic of him, you know, casting off, you know, lower bits of his nature and lower impulses. You don't need those bits of you that are corrupted like that.
Yeah, and another point
Because of
is
course, you know, the children are not fully troll.
no.
So I thought, with the sort of symbology of leaving them behind, you know,
Hmm.
it's sort of an indication that corrupted humanity is no good either.
Yeah, another
Because
point.
she does try to incite the children as something that he should consider,
Hmm.
but he's like, no, I will abandon everything with any traces of evil in it.
Yeah,
You know?
well, well, I do think it's quite clear in the story that he's not really invested in his children.
Yeah.
There's a when they are first introduced, they say that he wasn't quite concerned because they weren't giving him any trouble. But it doesn't state that he loved them very much or anything like that. It's basically, oh, there was no trouble for him, so he was okay with that, which is a bit cynical.
Yeah. It really is hard to tell who's the bad guy here.
Hmm. I wouldn't
It's
claim
quite
that.
hard.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that Nils is a particularly good person,
No.
but it's also a story of how he came to better ways. He married a woman basically for money. because she was able to give him more and better coal than he was able to make himself. So it was
Yeah.
never a love match. And she knew that as well, with imploring him for saving them, not for her own sake, but for the youngest child,
Yeah.
in particular the youngest daughter.
I suppose it could be saying matches just for money with absolutely no concept of love don't really end well,
No.
because you've got no reason to care about anything which comes from them, and therefore they are kind of rotten in the core of them.
Yeah.
But I think Western people have traditionally married for love a bit more, quite a bit more than other cultures, and I think Western women were marrying quite late in comparison to some other peoples as well.
Yeah, I think the average age for the underclasses, not the aristocracy, was around 20 or something for women. Maybe maybe a bit higher for men, because they had to be able to provide.
Yes, they
And
do.
it wasn't that common with a very large age difference, at least when the woman was very young. And even with the aristocracy, they might marry young, but they didn't necessarily consummate the marriage until a certain age, because pregnancy in a woman that is too young can be very dangerous, both for her and the child. So when there's alliances at stake, then it wouldn't be good for the mother and child to die. One example of that is the mother of Henry Tudor. I think she was 12 or 13 or something when
Yes,
she
she was
gave
about
birth to
that.
him. Yeah, it's theorized that she was unable to have children after that because she was so young. So that's the reason why he didn't have any siblings. Of course, his father died, I think, before he was born, but she was married twice after that. So it would be
Yeah,
reasonable to expect her to have more children. So that's an example of that practices.
it is indeed. I think there's sort of a push nowadays to make people think like, oh yes, everyone used to marry young in medieval Europe. I remember being distinctly under the impression that those sort of marriages were the norm, but they're really not.
Mm-hmm.
Marriages for money and marriages young are not the norm in European culture in the slightest, and you can get a very mistaken impression of that from the history books and
Yeah,
whatever else.
yeah,
They
well,
do, they do, to be fair, focus on aristocracy
exactly.
a lot of the time, and
Yeah,
that's a different sort of situation when you have to cement a political alliance between two countries pronto.
yeah.
But yeah,
That is two very different situations. And of course, the aristocracy was also the minority. The vast
there
majority
were
of people were just regular people, and they weren't bound by that. Of course, they might take into consideration the position and potential money that a suitor had or a maiden had, but it wasn't the main focus. So,
Page is also saying here like there's definitely proof of that in regards to the language used to refer to women, maidens, wives, mothers,
mhm.
and there's definitely a distinction there between wife and mother. They're by no means happening at the same time.
Yeah,
So you're betrothed, too young to do the last. That's definitely not going to be happening for you until it's time.
mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah. We also have a few stories here in Norway in how to test a potential suitor or a potential maid.
Oh,
to find out if they are would be a good wife and if they would be suited to take care of the home properly. So there is a bit of testing there as well, and that can definitely come in handy because you don't want to marry just anyone.
well,
So
testing has come up in some previous tales, hasn't it? There
mhm.
was the one about the north wind and the south wind that we read.
Yeah, that was
Yes,
east of the
she was
sun, west of the moon.
east of the sun and west of the moon. Yes, she was tested by having to wash a shirt
Mhm.
as to see whether she was wife material. So you can definitely see the recurring themes sort of cropping up there.
Yeah.
Now this one does seem to me, on thinking about it, to be a bit of a either a metaphor of corruption or a metaphor of what happens when you make your matches for the wrong reasons.
Mhm.
Because there does not seem to be a very clear baddie there, and I think that's very reflective of how trolls seem to be quite ambiguous, definitely. And we're going to see that some more in some of the stories coming up. They're a bit ambiguous. They can do good, they can not. Sometimes the good they do, you can go a bit wrong. And the next story that we have that I'm going to read out is called The Ale of the Trolls. And it's from Denmark. And it's quite short. So, The Ale of the Trolls. In a homestead near Roskilde, or Roskilde maybe, there once lived a man named Peter Anderson. And in a hillock on his farm dwelt a number of trolls. They were celebrating a wedding one day, and late at night they ran out of ale. Then a troll went to the peasant, who had brewed ale not long since, knocked at his door and said, "Will you help me out? Loan me a cask of ale, Peter Anderson. I will bring it back to you again when we have brewed." "Who are you, and where do you live?" asked the peasant. "I am the man from the hillock over there," said the troll. "Yes, go down into the cellar and help yourself to a cask," said the peasant. The troll got the ale and went home with it. A few nights later the troll came to the house again and knocked. The peasant woke up and asked, "Who is knocking?" "'Tis I," said the troll. "I'm bringing back the ale I borrowed from you. I have put it in the cellar, and I am going to reward you for being so obliging. If you take care not to look in the cask, you can draw from it as long as you wish. It will never grow empty." For a long time all went well. They drew, and there was always ale in the cask, and no one ever looked into it. But one day they had a new maid. She could not understand how it could be that there was never any ale brewed, and yet there was always ale on hand. So she determined to look into the cask, to see whether it would not soon be empty. But what was her fright when she saw the cask was full of toads! From that moment on, no more ale in it. So yes, actually rather nice trolls there, provided you don't question their methods too much.
Yeah, well, it's a it's an example of how you could live side by side with different creatures as long as you treated each other with respect and
Yes.
and helped each other out, then you would get something in return. So it's definitely a remnant of the famous hospitality of the Norse. So yeah, as long as you treat them with respect and everything, they will be relatively fine as neighbors. But you might not want to wish to see all of their methods of things. I'm not sure I would like to have drank glass after glass of frog ale or toad ale, so you might not want to look too closely into them. And I do wonder how the barrel kept refilling itself by toads. That is definitely nothing I was expecting at all. I have lost my co-host here. I will hope that she will be back uh, online very shortly. I thought you went a bit quiet there. Um, and I do find it interesting that they don't go out and want to kill all of them. They find it preferable to just leave them be as long as they don't cause any trouble. And as we have heard in other stories, um, they can be scared off um, for a long time, like we saw in the first story. And so they're basically part of nature, you could say.
Hello.
Hello, good to have you back.
Yes.
Yeah,
Who does love to do this?
yeah,
He
it
loves to
seems.
just kick me out, and it's not even my internet. I
Yeah,
don't even know what it is.
yeah, Discord seems to have a problem with you, but Skype has a problem with my computer.
Discord's just like, what? You? No. Shut up.
Yeah, we have to find out what's happening there.
I can't actually quite tell what's happening. Because, yeah, things seem to be loading and sending just fine. My
Yeah,
other devices that are using the internet. Perhaps I shall turn the internet off on my phone. That may prevent Discord kicking me out of my own stream again.
yeah,
Naughty Discord.
yeah,
Yeah, but I was just thinking about the frogs in that barrel of ale. I'm like, they always there? Were they integral to the enchantment? Did they just turn up as soon as it was opened?
yeah.
Do trolls have a magician's circle sort of thing going on where, like, look, you don't ask how I do my enchantments, okay? Like, I wonder why. Like, definitely the phrase curiosity for cat springs to mind, but I wonder why looking in the cask would mean no free beer.
Yeah, that is quite odd. I have to admit my thoughts went to drinking toad ale.
Oh yeah. Well,
uh,
there is there's a there's a Belgian ale or something called Ale of the Toads. I wonder if they heard about this story or something.
that might be the
Yeah.
case. I do see quite a few stories, and that are very similar, uh, or have traces that you can put from other stories. So there seems to be quite a bit of themes going around, but changing due to the different areas and different peoples. So that can definitely be the case.
Yeah, indeed. Well, that's the tale of trolls being helpful and providing free bits. Stevo's saying, "Hello. Is there problems? Perhaps." Well, everybody else seems to be getting us.
Yeah, I don't know
Anybody
what.
experiencing any buffering, chat?
Well, they haven't said anything, so I think it's
They
fine.
haven't said anything. I think we shall assume it is fine, chat, if you are not notifying us of any offering. So we've got three extremely short tales about trolls. And they're just called Tales of the Trolls. Swedish folk tale, but it's really about three folk tales sort of condensed into one, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll just read them all out because they're all very short and they all show different things that trolls might get up to. Peasant from Jursagard in the parish of Hanger had gone to the forest the day before Christmas and started out for home in the late evening. He had just about reached the Klinterberg when he heard someone call out, "Tell the malt swine to come home, for her child has fallen into the fire." When the peasant reached home, there stood his wife, who had been brewing the Yuletide ale, and she was complaining that though she brewed and brewed, did not have the right flavour. Then he told her what had been shouted at him from the hill. And at that very moment a troll witch, whom they had not noticed before, darted down from the stove and made off in a great hurry. And when they looked closer, they found that she had left behind a great kettle of the best malt, which she had gathered during the brewing. And that was the reason that the poor woman had not been able to give her brew the right flavour. The kettle was large, made of ornament of metal, and was long preserved in Hanger. It was at length sold at auction in 1838 and melted down. This is tale 2. In former days, when a child came into this world, his mother was known as a heathen until she could take him to church to be christened. It was not safe for her to leave the house unless she carried steel about her in some shape or form. Now, there was once one of these heathen women in Norra Rid, in the parish of Hanger, prepared lunch for the mowers, and went out and called them in to eat. Then one of the mowers said to her, "I cannot come, for my sheaf is not yet bound." "I will bind it for you," said the woman. Mowers went in and ate, but saw no more of her. They went back into the field, and were about to take up their work again. Still neither saw nor heard her. They began to search and hunted for a number of days, but all in vain. Time passed till it was late in the fall. One day the weather was clear and sunny. To this very day, potter's hut called Kusabo, that stands on a hill named Kusas, and the carter lived there, went to look for a horse. There on the hillside he saw the woman sitting who had disappeared. She was sewing. It was not a far ride from Kusabo to Norra Rid, so he recognized her at once. He said, "Oh, you poor thing, and here you sit." "Yes," said she, "you must never mention it to Lars." That was her husband, "for I shall never return from this place. Even now I am only allowed to sit outside for a little while." Once upon a time, a girl was hunting for berries on Kusaba Mountain, and was taken into the hill, but she wept night and day, which disgruntled the trolls, and they let her out again. Just as they were letting her out, one of the trolls hit her such a blow on the back that she was humpbacked for the rest of her life. She herself used to tell how she had been kept in the hill. So yes, that is 3 very short encounters there of trolls in Sweden. And, older faiths and superstitions are reflected in those 3 tales.
Mm-hmm.
And the first, well, this book, at the time of this book. I do believe that's in 1921. This is a book that's been compiled from. First is also current in Norway. Others tell of women who have bergtagen, taken
Mhm.
into the mountain. It is not so long since that every humped back, every weak mind, in short, every ill that had no visible explanation, was ascribed to the troll folk.
Mhm.
Well, it's a good excuse, isn't it?
Yeah.
Trolls done it. Who broke the lamp? It was a troll.
Yeah.
Definitely a troll.
We also had the excuse of the Nisse. That's what it's called in
Yes,
Norway and Denmark, and in Sweden it's the Tomte.
I have indeed heard you swear that they must be affecting your computer
Yeah,
several times. They're
yeah,
handy, aren't they?
yeah, they
They
are.
can they can crop up and be responsible for many things.
Yeah, in particular with things that disappear, and you can't find them no matter how much you look for them. And then suddenly, one day they reappear, and that's usually the Nisse
Yes.
that's been uh, doing some mischief, and that is mostly due to you ignoring them in some way or another.
Yes.
But we will return to the Nissa again in another episode because
Yes.
we
They're
have
a bit
plenty
of a
of
different
creatures.
thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
we
They
want.
sound they sound off the top of my head a little more akin to goblins, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if there's a particular equivalent of a Nissa in the British Isles, but they're usually a good omen and someone who helps around. Of course, as long as you treat them correctly, of course. If you don't, then you
Yes,
will regret it. So,
it's true.
yeah.
No, no, I'm wondering why this troll would just be sat on this woman's fireplace stealing her malt. Now, I know beer is symbolic, it's often, been libated to the gods. I know grain is a symbol of fertility
Hmm.
and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, back in the day, ale and beer was very important because it was an important source of pure drinking. Because if
Yes,
you couldn't always trust the water, if there's a dead carcass lying a bit up the stream, then yeah,
have to boil things. You have to try as best you can to sterilize things, and alcohol kills germs to
yeah,
extent.
yeah. It's either that or fermenting. Uh, Before ale brewing came, at least before it became very widespread, I have heard that they fermented bread in water, in particular rye bread, and they continued this tradition over in the Eastern Europe. So
Yes, that's how you get kvass, isn't it?
yeah, you can make that by rye bread or by red beets. It depends a bit from region to region, but that was usually very common with the people selling it on the street in big barrels, and it was provided for the farmhands uh, when they have a lot to do. So it was a
Yes.
very important source, and sometimes it's been considered a health drink, including by the Tsars. So it was very
Yes, I have
important.
heard that about it.
Yeah,
A health drink similar to other fermented drinks are considered health drinks, aren't they? Like kefir and kombucha.
yeah, and the fermentation will kill off the bad bacteria because
And promote the good bacterias.
exactly, and that is not only to prevent disease, but it's also very good for the body. So
Yes, aids the digestion, and it could have been an early way of sort of increasing the immune response, I guess, as certainly there's less capacity for other bad bacteria to breed
Mm-hmm.
when you've already got a healthy gut flora.
Yeah, I make kombucha myself, and it's really good.
I've never tried.
Oh,
I'm fairly new to jams and fermenting and pickling and all of that malarkey.
yeah, new to that as well, but kombucha
Yeah.
I definitely managed to make, and it's really easy as well, as long as you
Nice.
have the source.
Yes, the sort of like, is it got a starter, a bit like sourdough would have?
Yeah, you can basically just buy a bottle in the store, and then you add that to a large batch of very strong and sweet tea, and cover it with a dishcloth and let it stand. And then you taste it during the process. Of course, you have to check it to see if there's enough culture in the starter.
Neat.
And if it is, then you just taste it, and when you like it, you start a second fermentation after bottling it. And let
Yes.
that stand in room temperature for a couple of days, and then you pop it in the fridge and drink it at your leisure. And then you will have a nice sparkly drink that is good for you, unlike soda.
We do not just do folktales. Everybody just learned how to make kombucha on this stream.
Yeah.
We educate. We
Yeah.
educate upon many things.
Indeed.
Then there's this. She's left behind a kettle, and I guess this is a story around an antique that's actually been in the town.
Mm-hmm.
They've come up with a story behind it.
Yeah.
So it may or may not be the oldest sort of story. I keep sort of mildly being amused at the name of this place. Hanger. Like, what is that? That's something that you invented? Is the hanger invented in Hanger? Any etymological relation?
I'm not sure.
Or is everyone
because
there just hungry angry?
I think it's more different in language. Uh,
Yeah.
but some names are very funny in different languages because the meaning can become quite extreme in some cases.
Yes.
We have a few products that have different names in Norwegian because the original name becomes a bit obscene.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, there's a few of those places in England.
Yeah.
A few of those places where you look at, and England sort of refuses to change the name of these places. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
perfectly good place name. So you get like, I'll have to look some up on the internet and for the laughs and post them because there's some quite funny English place names.
Yeah,
Then there's tale number 2.
I have to admit that the first time I heard about Middlesex, I I chuckled a bit.
That's not even one of the worst.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to be a bit mild.
There's a place in. There's some just weird sounding places. Like there's a village in Scotland called Ecclefechan,
Ah.
which I find quite funny. It sounds like a very creative expletive.
Yeah. Well, we don't know how it came about, so maybe it was
Yeah.
back in the day. But tale number
And
2.
there is indeed tale number 2. A mother who is known as a heathen, so hasn't taken her child to church to be christened, and it's not safe for her to leave the house unless she carries steel about her in some shape or form. Now, I've heard of that before.
Mm-hmm. That is very common in Scandinavia.
Yeah, steel
will,
and protection.
yeah, steel and iron will ward off evil spirits in different manners or different uh, creatures. It guards off trolls and ghosts and devils and all sorts of things. So steel is handy to have, apparently.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk indefinitely if you look at contemporary sort of witchcraft pagan circles, which I sort of cringe a bit sometimes, but they've kept some genuinely quite ancient traditions. They do use iron and steel still in many traditions
Mm-hmm.
of sort of magic craft for protection.
Yeah, Rowdy says that lead also does a good job of warding off evil, and that is certainly true. We see
I've
lead
heard,
being used as well.
yes, good at warding off evil. Quite toxic. Don't touch.
Mm-hmm.
Will ward off the evil. Might also make you dead.
Yeah.
You won't be affected by evil in this world, but you know, I don't know what sort of repercussions it has in the afterlife for touching toxic lead. I don't know if the afterlife imposes penalties for stupidity.
I have no idea, but it might.
It might do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but certainly I've heard of iron and salt
Mm-hmm.
for protection against the devil
Yeah.
in Christian. I don't know. Do you have it in Norway where you throw salt over your left shoulder to keep the devil away, or wear
Yeah.
horseshoes are
Yeah.
good luck?
Yeah, and with horseshoes, if you nail it to the wall, you have to nail it the right way, with the
Yes.
open part upwards, because or else the good luck will run out.
Yes, that's sort of a similar thing. I've heard that before as
Mm-hmm.
well. That you
Yeah.
don't hold that your horseshoes lock you when you hold it the right way up.
Yeah.
But you hold it the wrong way up, well, quite clearly all the luck spills out of it.
Yeah.
Or the opening facing the ground. That's how luck works.
Yeah. It's not in a
Yeah.
circle, so you have to keep it in there. We also have, for example, if you see a black cat going across the road, then you spit over the left shoulder to ward off evil.
Ah, okay. So
So
you see a black cat crossing the road, you have to go pleh over your left shoulder.
basically,
I bet they're trying to stop that one with the epidemic.
well, that's not
You'll
quite.
stop spitting on the ground because of cats, which you want to
Fortunate,
take with.
fortunately, they stopped doing that quite
Yeah.
a long time ago. So if you are spitting, it's not because there's been a black cat or running across the road. It's because
Yeah.
you don't have much manners.
Yeah, I don't know if there was ever any traditions related to spitting in Britain, but it's quite frowned upon. Like personally, when I see it, I find it quite disgusting.
Yeah,
I
so
think
do
you do
I.
sometimes see people spitting at the side of the road.
Hmm.
Not good.
No,
But yes, the
it's not.
woman.
It's not
Oh,
anything that's usually done in Norway. So it's more just for exceptional cases, like when a cat crosses the road, a black cat.
yes,
So
specific color of cat.
yeah, back in the day there weren't that many roads either, so it didn't happen very often.
Yeah, but this lady has obviously gone out of the house without her steel, iron,
Or so.
or salt. But this one specifically requires steel. Unbaptized child, steel. And so it's not really directly mentioned that there is a troll, but it's in the tales of the trolls. So presumably they put this down to a case of troll kidnapping when she remains too long outside,
Mhm.
kindly doing some work
Yeah.
for the workmen. I mean, sheaths are quite symbolic.
Mhm.
They're sort of abundance and prosperity and fertility, a harvest, and there's a woman with a sheath, and she's been, you know, kidnapped and taken by the forces of evil because she's not had the chance to sort of consecrate the birth of her offspring. So I guess that one sort of has messages about, women should have legitimate relationships and legitimately have children and bed them within the spiritual tradition. Otherwise, they might become lost, I guess.
Mhm.
Off the top of my head with that one.
Yeah, well, it does point to mothers who are leaving their children, mostly with death, but some, as in this story, disappearance. And that is quite an old theme. But what stood out to me more there is the connection with the maiden who is taken to the underworld. In particular Persephone, and that heralds in death and winter. And here we see the harvest being taken in, and in this case, it's a mother, of course, but it's still a young woman. And in fall, she is taken inside the mountain into the underworld, and she's not coming back. So, mm-hmm.
I guess I get the symbology of a young woman being taken away from the community, a symbol of abundance and fertility being taken away sort of directly after harvest,
Mm-hmm.
reminds me of just winter in itself.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. She was found again later, wasn't she? When she was let out.
Yes.
Yeah. Was
She's
there any?
sitting on the hillside, but she's only allowed to sit outside for a little while.
Yeah.
And she's ashamed of not having gotten the kid baptized sooner, I guess, because you mustn't ever mention it to my husband where I've gone.
Mm-hmm. But I found it
Why?
yeah, I found it interesting that she's allowed outside again, but only for a while, because that also points me back to Persephone, who was allowed to leave the underworld in Hades for a certain amount of time of the year, and then she had to go back to
Yes.
him for a certain amount of time. So
Yeah.
there's definitely traces in that story.
So yeah, she is sort of maybe representative of the seasons who are only allowed to come back for a little while. And usually when you get the Mother Earth goddess, she's then usually a brief union with her husband, usually the sky god, and then is separated.
Mm-hmm.
That could also be quite symbolic. I feel like that second story has older roots, maybe,
Yeah.
than the first one, which seems to be made up to justify the presence of a particularly odd kettle, which is very ornamented,
Yeah.
which
Eh,
could have been someone's sort of master apprentice piece or some
yeah.
such like.
Yeah, it could. But it's hard to say if it's something that is very old before it suddenly shows up. Um, because, of course, there's been legends that is tied to it. But the true
Yes.
origins can be a bit hard to find because not
Yeah.
everything was known, or it might even have been bought a long time ago.
Might indeed.
Yeah, what we see in northern Norway is a lot of church art, mantelpiece stuff.
Yeah, that's
Um, yeah, and that originated in Germany, and the fishermen had bought it in Bergen uh, when they were down there selling their fish because they could actually earn quite a bit of money on on their trips down there. So it's been quite amazing afterwards to see all of the precious art that has been there. Because you
I should
wouldn't
imagine it
expect,
is.
yeah, you wouldn't expect, a little village up in northern Norway to have a very expensive church ornament. So, so it
No,
could
you wouldn't.
be, it could be something that's been bought a long time ago and then got some sort of story.
That should be true because it's sort of the presence of finery that they don't feel like they can otherwise explain.
Yeah, or just a myth that tied itself to it over the years. It's hard
Yeah.
to know.
Now there's been sort of myths tied to buildings and stuff. Like there's been myths tied to how spires got bent, stuff like that in England, and myths tied to objects all over the world, really.
Hmm.
And then there's the third story, where the girl's hunting for berries on Kursaba Mountain, and then she was taken into the hill, but she's wept too much and annoyed the trolls. And then they let her out again, but they've permanently left her humpbacked because they've hit her really hard,
Yeah, that's an
which
interesting one.
yeah, just sort of indicates there in that last one that trolls just do violence sometimes,
Hmm.
but for no reason. Like they'd already got her out of their hill, they didn't have to damage her in that way,
Yeah, but
but they did.
they're not the smartest creatures, so lashing out might be expected of them, so to speak.
Yeah, and then it's not sort of clear what they've kidnapped her for. They seem to want to keep humans around for, entertainment, for a look at something nicer than them a lot of the time.
Well, they do
But
like
this one's not been any fun,
no.
so they've just told her to get lost.
Yeah, well, they do seem to like well-behaved young maidens. So,
Yes,
if that's what
or
they're used to,
nitpicking, as we have encountered.
yeah. Apparently, they have a lot of lice in their hair.
They should learn about shampoo, really, instead of just kidnapping all these maidens.
Yeah, they should.
Get the lice out of their hair for them.
Well, if they
Get rid of a
are,
nit comb.
yeah, if they do take a maiden, they could just make sure that you have a lye comb and some lye soap, and she can just wash their hair and be on her way home again.
Indeed.
But
But then again, they're not the sharpest tools in the box,
no,
trolls.
no, and they're trolls, so you can't expect too much of them, I guess.
And there seems to be a very big association of them with all of these tales with hills.
Yeah, they do live in hills for the most part. There are a few stories about water trolls or sea trolls, but that's sort of a different type. It's not the same troll
Yes.
as the one found on land. but those on land, they are definitely tied to mountains and hills and rocks.
Yes, sort of rocks scattered around Norwegian countryside are said to be trolls turned into stone.
Yeah, there's some of that. We also have elven stones here and there.
I hadn't heard
Uh,
about those ones.
I've seen one a few years back, and it was an odd one. Let's just keep it at that.
Yeah.
And again, it's the tie with trolls and in particular the mountain ranges. At least Norway doesn't have many flat areas, and of course that's the area I know best. But as we've seen, we encountered that in Denmark as well, and everyone knows that Denmark is a pancake, basically. It's just
Yes.
completely flat with a very small hill that they call a mountain.
It's flat. I think possibly the only flatter place is Holland.
Yeah.
They would probably look at Denmark's small hill and be like, well, that is a very large mountain.
Yeah, Norwegians come down and say,
Yeah.
this is a bump in the road, basically. So, it depends on what you're used to. Up here we are used to high mountains everywhere, basically. So, coming to Denmark where everything is flat is just odd, basically.
Yeah. Don't like Denmark. Too
Mm,
flat.
yeah.
Don't trust a country that's that flat when they get so flat. That's not what Norwegians think about Denmark.
Well, maybe it's the runaway pancake. Maybe the pancake didn't get eaten at all, but settled itself down and became Denmark. I don't know.
Denmark is a pancake dropped by the gods.
Yeah, Odin's pancake.
That's a weirdly specific name for Denmark.
Yeah.
Perhaps the Danish would like it.
Maybe.
I think we are coming up to the end of the stream.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess trolls are very ambiguous sort of creatures. They can be nice to you, they can be not nice to you, they can look like humans, they can not.
Mhm.
They're generally quite ugly, or they have tails.
Yeah. They're not the brightest creatures around, but as I say, it's a broad umbrella of different creatures, so they're not uniform at all. And they serve different functions in different tales. So it can be a bit hard to nail them down, so to speak, into a neat packaging.
Yeah,
So I try to
they're
reflect that.
very varied.
Hmm.
What they could mean. It seems to depend on who's writing, what sympathies they've got, what they're trying to express.
Hmm.
But they're certainly one of the most omnipresent and interesting creatures throughout Scandinavian folklore for that sort of reason. And they'll certainly be cropping up in other stories, I think, outside of streams specifically related to trolls.
Yeah.
'Cause we've had them a few times.
I think I've had them in basically every tale I've told so far.
Yes.
Uh, so they are a diverse kind, we have to say. We have a diverse range of trolls up here. So
No, if anyone wants to watch a funny film about trolls, there is a troll mockumentary called Troll Hunter.
Yeah, that's quite
I
funny.
found that quite funny.
Yeah. It's actually
Quite a good
quite
one.
accurate as well. And though it's not my first personal favorite amongst any politicians, I do find it a bit funny that our former Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg actually does a cameo in that as Prime
Yes.
Minister. So that was actually quite fun.
And I kind of wonder, like, is that him being paid to be in the film, or is that them riffing off and editing an actual real life clip of him?
I actually think the clip was made for the film. It didn't seem like anything that was, cut and pasted back together. So I actually
Yeah.
think, but I haven't looked into it, so I can't say 100%, but
True.
it definitely sounded like it to me. So
Quite cool when you get the Prime Minister to go do a cameo in your film.
Yeah, I'll give him that much at least.
Yeah, I have no idea who freaking is.
No.
Not a clue. Probably, I'm guessing, about as effective as any of the prime ministers that Britain has had in the past few decades.
Yeah, he was the former leader. He's the former leader of the Labour Party. So
Say no more.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
but I hope that we have given you guys a varied look on the real trolls, the original trolls from Scandinavia, that you have enjoyed this stream and been a bit more enlightened on what troll actually is outside of the supported internet trolls.
Yes. Internet trolls can be fascinating creatures. Also, sometimes you do wonder what motivates them.
Yeah, but I do have to admit that I prefer my
Real
trolls. Yeah, the real life trolls.
They're sometimes a bit simpler to deal with. I mean, they can't keep making alt accounts.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Well, goodbye, everyone.
Yeah,
Have a good evening.
I hope you have had a wonderful time with us, and I wish you a continuing enjoyable evening. And I hope to see you next time. Bye.